In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the three most important points, or you can even say three tips that you can use while working in this virtual world over here. And following these three tips will help you reduce the error while modeling a character or modeling any object in your virtual world. And let me list out the points for you first. The first point is always remember to start your model from the central of the global axis. So this is the center. You can see that 0 point over there where these two lines intersect. Yeah, that is the global axis. And the second point is always remember to keep in track of the image over here. I like to call this image as axis mapping. We'll see that in detail after a while. And the third point is always have a center pivot point in the center of your model. These are the 3 points that you have to remember. Okay, let me detail on the 3 points that I mentioned earlier, starting from the first one. The first one that I mentioned was to start your model from the center of the global axis that is present here. More than start is always a good practice to keep your model in the center as long as possible. Finish the entire model and move it to the desired location. That's an even more good practice than only starting it over here. I'll show you why. For say if I need to create a cube, let me create one, right? So I have created a cube. Now I need to scale my cube exactly 4 units in all the 3 directions. I mean 2 units in all the 3 directions, sorry. So you can see that since my object is in the center, I can easily calculate the 2 units. So this my cube should be occupying this whole grid over here. So I scale it, and there you go. Your cube is scaled uniformly in all the 3 axes, and it occupies 2 units in all the 3 axes. In X, it occupies 2 units. In Y, you can see it occupies 2 units. And in Z, see, this is the Z, it occupies 2 units. Now, if say I don't have my model over here, say I had my model somewhere, some random location over there. So I have my model over here, and similar way I want to do the same thing what I did there. I want to scale my model 2 units equally in all the 3 axes. Now you won't be able to calculate how much you actually have to scale your model, because your model is not lying in the center. It's quite hard to judge which is the center point and how much long you need to scale that object, whether it's still here or moreover, whether it's still here or you still need to increase it. So it's the grids here are quite complicated. So it's always good practice. Let me select and delete it. It's always good practice to start it over here, so that whenever you scale or do any changes, it's easy for measurement reference. The next point that I suggested was to keep in track of the image over here. I like to call this image as axis mapping, and this image, the function of this image is quite similar to the compass. Like the compass, which tells us the directions, the different directions, north, south, east and west, this axis mapping tells you in what direction all the 3 axes of your virtual world runs, right? So for now, let's see. Yeah, for now, the blue one, that is the z-axis. The red one is running towards you. You can see it here. So this is the x-axis, and the green one, which is running like this. So this will be your y-axis. If you recall what we saw in the first chapter about the 3D coordinates and the Cartesian coordinates, we saw that the 3D coordinates has three axes, x, y, and z, and the z was the axis that is showing you the depth. So it is always a good practice to have your z-axis pointing towards you. Okay, so now you can see that your z-axis is actually running in this direction. So see the maybe a clearer view. Yeah, see the blue line here? It runs in this direction. The reason for it is that z is the axis that actually gives you the depth. So depth is nothing but if you have two objects, which object is in the front and which object is in the back, that gives you the depth. So only if you're facing in the right direction, you can get the right depth. So now that your z-axis is pointing towards you, if you want to have two objects, say I have a cube over here, I want this cube to be right in front, maybe somewhere over here, and I'm going to create another cube. I'm going to push this cube right over back. Now you can actually see the depth, right? So this cube is bigger and that cube is smaller. Now let me show you what happens if you have your axis in the wrong direction. For this I'm going to open a file that I've already created. Let me open scene 3. I'll just get done save to that. Okay. This is a room that I'm modeling recently, and just a second. I'll share another view for you. Okay, double sided. Okay, let's have it opposite itself. No, what? Just have it opposite. Okay, this is the room that I'm modeling recently, and I want my room to. This is the front side of my room, and my shelves and all are in the side over here. But you can see that I have modeled this room in the wrong axis. That is, if you move this room and see, okay, so you can see that the x-axis is actually facing towards me, and the z-axis is actually in this line. So I've interchanged the x and z axis. So if I move this again, and if I want to make some change, say I want to move this shelf, you can see here, sorry, that's not selected. Let me go closer and select that. Okay, this is the shelf. I want to move it a little bit front, so it's easier for me to move it in the four perspective view. So I'm going here, and in the four perspective view, this view actually becomes the front side. But since I have modeled it wrong, you can see that this actually doesn't show me my front view, it shows the side view. And my side view is actually showing my front view. And even in this you can see that the front side, you can see that the Z should always face in front of you, right? So if you're modeling something, and let's go back to the single perspective view. So if you're modeling something and you don't get your axis right, you'll get in a lot of complicated problems. Like one I just told you, now I can't refer to this four view here and move anything or make changes. It will confuse me more. So I have to be keeping on working in this view, right? So you can see that it is always good to work inside Maya by keeping your axis mapping in mind, and the right axis facing you, so that you can avoid the confusion in the later stages. And you can that doesn't mean you just have to do everything in this view. You can turn your model in whatever direction you want, but make sure you come back to the correct direction and do all the changes, and again you can turn them and edit them in whatever way you want. The last point that I suggested was to have a center pivot point for all the objects and the model that you're going to create here. I'll show you what a pivot point is first. let's say I'm going to create something, and you can see that if you want to move or anything, the yellow color line over here, let me go that unshaded, yeah, now it's clear. The yellow color dotted line over here, that's the pivot point. The use of the pivot point is that whatever happens to this cube over here, whatever changes I'm going to do is going to happen uniformly if I hold on to this pivot point. Okay, so for example, if I'm going to scale that, I'm going to hold on to that yellow box over here, and if I scale that, you can see that it's happening uniformly. Okay, and say I'm going to create a cube, and my pivot point is actually not in center, right? Okay, and my pivot point is over here. um, Let me select that. Okay, now it's not in the center, and I'm going to scale the same object. And you can see the difference, it's not scaling uniformly, right? And maybe for one object it doesn't have any effect. For example, if you're going to have a shelf, okay, let's create a shelf. So let's start by having a cube. Let me make this a little bit flat, to the big, flat, broader shelf. Yeah, not too broad. Okay, okay. Let me move this up. Okay, I'm doing the same mistake. My Z is not facing me. Let's make the Z face me. See, Z axis does face you. So the shell, I think it's in the right direction. Control D. I'll have 3 rows. Control D. Yeah, that's 3 rows of shell. Let's have a support for my shell. Created another cube over there. Let me make it a bit slim, flat, broader, like that. Move it up, move it closer, okay, move that closer, yeah, a little bit closer, and I'm sorry, and scale it up like that. Okay, push it in, still too thick, scale it in, yeah, that should do. Too broad, scale that too. Just a rough model for you for your understanding, right? Okay, imagine this is the wall support, and I have 3 shelves right here. So I want to have this as the one object, so I'm going to select everything, going to mesh and combine. See, I have combined my objects, so this becomes one object, and you can see that my pivot point is not in the center. So if I'm going to scale this particular object, it's not actually scaling uniformly. So it's always good practice to have your to have your pivot point in center. To have it in center, press the insert button in your keyboard. You can see that the icon changes here. Just hold on to it and push it so that it's somewhere near center, right? This side's not center, so close your center. You can place your pivot point somewhere here. I think that's about center. Can view it in all the directions. Not quite center. Yeah, that should do. That center. And again, click on your insert button. Go back to your normal mode. And now, if you scale it, you can see that it's actually scaling in the uniform direction. Or you can. This applies for even for rotation and everything. Right? It rotates uniformly. If your pivot point is not in the center, this won't happen. Okay, so let's recall. It's always good practice to start your model in the 0 0 axis here, and keep in mind the axis mapping that is present to your left, and also the center pivot point that appears for all your objects.